Let's get started. Hello, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining Code for Canada's open house. My name is Nicole. I'm the team's communications coordinator. And, normally we would be meeting in person today, but we've created some virtual space to catch up. So I'm really grateful and happy, and thank you on behalf of the team for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. And I know we're joining from probably all over the country, so I decided to just narrow down the acknowledgement to the land that Code for Canada is headquartered on. We're in downtown Toronto at Spadina and Dundas, and that's the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is currently home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And then we also have some fellows here from Measurement Canada tonight. They're typically based in Ottawa. Well, you also will have some guest appearances from my puppy throughout the evening. And that's the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And then our fellowship team from OMAFRA would typically be based in Guelph. So I'd also like to acknowledge the land there. That's in the Dish with One Spoon territory and is the traditional land of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Anishinaabe peoples. And I encourage you to get curious if you don't know whose traditional lands you're on. And there's actually a really cool resource that I'll share in the chat in a moment, but it's an app developed by a Haudenosaunee developer named Mitch Holmes, and it's called Whose Land, WHOSE, Whose Land. And if you look there, you can put in where you are, and it'll show you the history of that land, which is pretty cool. So with that in mind, I'll take you through the agenda. So we just did our land acknowledgement. I'll give you a little bit more information about Code for Canada for anybody who's not familiar with what we do. Luke is going to tell us a bit about Open Call. There. And Doug is going to take you through what the fellowship program is all about. Quiet, buddy. And then we'll hear from our Measurement Canada fellows and our OMAFRA fellows about the work that they're doing at the moment. That's a little bit about what to expect. You can also expect some side commentary from my puppy. So Code for Canada, just to give you a quick overview, was founded in 2017. And there are a few others kind of similar organizations around the world. We're not kind of part of one central organization, but we all have pretty similar mandates, which is tech for good and building civic capacity in government, digital capacity in government, and civic capacity in the tech industry. And we do that in a few ways. We have several programs. So our fellowship program, I'll leave for Doug to take you through. But we also have Grit Toronto. Grit stands for Gathering Residents to Improve Technology. And through that program, we do inclusive usability testing and research. And you would think that may have come to a halt because of coronavirus, but our lead who manages that program, Marissa, has actually done a really awesome job of kind of like rejigging things to make them work remotely, and it's been really successful. So I'm excited to pass more information about that along later. If you're interested, I'd be happy to do so. And we also have Civic Hall Toronto. That's a membership-based program where we partner with city teams to work on digital projects, and we connect them with civic tech community to help them do so as well. And then we also, there are civic tech chapters across the country. And so to help, we help them get started if they're looking for that assistance. There's Civic Tech Toronto, there's Civic Tech St. John. A lot of them meet on Tuesday nights. So if you're interested in participating in any of those, this is actually a great time to do so as well, because you can dive into a civic tech night anywhere in the country without leaving your house, which is pretty cool. And then we also have some education and training programs. We offer a variety, and they're mainly to help public servants get familiar with the tools and methods of digital. And those trainings can look like anything from a multi-week course to things that are custom designed for government teams. Before we jump into the fellowship, I will pass the mic over to my colleague Luke, who would like to tell you a little bit about an initiative we're working on called Open Call.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luke Simcoe. I'm the Director of Outreach at Code for Canada. And before we sort of get into our regularly scheduled open house programming, I wanted to share a little bit about an initiative that we're collaborating with some teams from the federal government, including the Canadian Digital Service and the Canada School of Public Service, that's specifically related to COVID-19. It's called Open Call, and it's a collaboration that we're working on to enable government teams at all levels of government to quickly spin up kind of new or improved digital services that are going to help residents and businesses during the pandemic. In particular, it's a catalog of open source tools that kind of can address a lot of the common challenges governments face during the pandemic, as well as a really interesting kind of pro bono technical support program to help those teams adapt and deploy those tools in their context. So we're working with government teams from across the country at all three levels of government to help them kind of quickly scope some of the challenges that they're facing and then deploy ideally open source tools to address those challenges. It's a pro bono service. It's available to government teams for free across the country. So if you or someone you know works in the public service and needs some digital kind of surge capacity to address some challenges related to COVID-19, they can reach out, get in touch. It's easy to find. You can find Open Call all over Code for Canada's social media feeds. You can Google it. And we're really thrilled to be working with some teams at the federal government to make it happen. So happy to take questions about that. Happy to connect more. And it's been a really exciting program to kind of, as we like to say, help governments move at the speed of need during the pandemic. So if you want to know more, get in touch, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, Luke. So next, as promised, we have a little bit more information about the fellowship program, and my colleague Doug, who works on the fellowship team, is going to walk you through what that's all about. Go ahead, Doug.
Hey everyone, I'm Doug Vidal-Hernandez. I work here on the fellowship team with our government relations. I'll just have the chance here to talk a little bit about our fellowship team. So to begin, the whole idea of our fellowship team really is to embed 3 different fellows who work either on development, on user experience design, or on product management into different government departments to build what Nick had been talking about before, to build digital capacity. So our goal really is to connect public service and the government community with the tech and design community, with individuals who want to use their skills for good. Our fellowship is 10 months, and the idea, like I said, is really to collaborate with those government hosts to design those digital services that really work better for users and for Canadians in particular. So I just wanted to highlight this quote here that we had from Andrea Hill, who was a former fellow with us here at Code for Canada as a UX designer. She really shared with us that joining Code for Canada as a fellow was an aspect that let her shape the way the country and the society that she wanted to live in. And we think that's a very important aspect here of what we want to embody here at Code for Canada. We really want to provide people with the opportunity to be able to contribute to society and to their government in a way that perhaps they haven't been able to do so in the private sector. Do you want to go to the next slide, Nick? So the idea here that we have with our fellowship program is really to kind of demonstrate what's possible with both the latest methods of user research and product design. And what we try to mean by that is really we want to try and build products for users in particular, for Canadians. A lot of the different things that we've encountered previously is when the business side of government is allowed to build some of these products, we don't always end up with the products that a specific Canadian needs. And so what we want to do is kind of bring these digital tools and processes in a way that allows to build that digital capacity in the public service and create a great product for Canadians in a way that they'll actually be able to use some of those things. So I just want to highlight here a specific quote from Colleen Birmingham, who's one of our current government hosts actually with Measurement Canada, which is an agency at Innovation, Science and Economic Development. she's just highlighting how the fellows, the different tool sets that they have, it's a very refreshing aspect. It really brings different issues and different perspectives than what they've never been able to see in government. And that's kind of something that we're really proud of in terms of what we're able to accomplish here at Code for Canada. And you'll actually be able to see the Measurement Canada project, actually, where Jasper and Ramis will be able to talk about that later on after my little segment here. Go to the next slide there, Nick. So for this year, the projects that we have laid out with the different government partners are both at the provincial level with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, as well as at the federal level with Measurement Canada, as I mentioned here previously, and with two different teams at Transport Canada, both with the marine safety and security side and the security team within Transport Canada. And one of our government partners here, Will, was very kind to provide a quote here. That again, I tend to talk about the user aspect of what we're very proud of, and I think that's a very big aspect of what we like to talk about here. And the biggest difference that the fellows are looking at is that they're looking at the problem statement from the end user perspective, not the business perspective. And that's something that we really, like I said, are very proud of, and that we like to focus on here at Code for Canada, is ensuring that our service delivery in particular is being done for users. You want to go to the next slide? So one thing that I do want to highlight as well is that we will actually be opening applications for our next cohort of fellowship. As you can see here, these are our current cohort of the fellows that we have here right now. You guys will have a chance to hear from Seyi at the team of at OMAFRA, the Ontario Ministry for Agricultural and Food and Rural Affairs, as well as from Ramis and Jasper, who will be at Measurement Canada. But we have a wide variety of fellows with different backgrounds in the private sector, from different areas of the country as well. They specialize as either product managers, as developers, or as UX designers. So we'll actually be opening applications for our 5th cohort very soon, midway through next month. So I'd very much recommend that you keep an eye out on that in particular, both on our website, our newsletter, or through our social media channels. And then just the last slide there, Nick. So this is just a small little introduction here to our fellowship team. Normally during an open house event, we'd love to have the opportunity to get to connect and meet with the fellowship team or with other individuals who might be interested in applying. Unfortunately, because this is a virtual event, I just wanted to highlight the individuals who are normally responsible for our fellowship team. Meha, who is our fellowship program lead, Flavi, who works on coaching and support with the fellows in particular, and then myself here on the government relations side of things. So again, I just want to highlight that we will be opening applications for our next cohort very soon, and we'd love to have your application there for our next and 5th cohort. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Doug. Before we jump into our first fellowship presentation, I just wanted to remind anyone who maybe just joined that you could say hi in the chat, introduce yourself. And during the presentations, if you have any questions, we're going to do a Q&A at the end. So there's actually a Q&A button. You can pop your questions into that channel. They'll come to me, and I'll pose them for you. I'll pose them for you when the time is right. And if for some reason we don't get to your questions during our time together today, everyone registered, so I have all your information, and I'll make sure to get you an answer as soon as I can. And with that, I will pass things over to Jasper and Ramis.
Thank you, Nicole. Hey guys, so I'm Jasper. This is our team. So I'm the product manager for Measurement Canada, and I'm the one in the middle. And I have Ramis on the line with us as well. He's on the left. Ramis, you want to say hi?
Hey everyone.
Ramis is our user experience designer. And on our right, we have Noor, our developer, who is not with us tonight. Next slide, please. So very quickly about Measurement Canada, I'm sure most of us probably have never even heard of Measurement Canada, and that's totally okay, because I've never heard of Measurement Canada too until I got on this project. But in a nutshell, what Measurement Canada does is they ensure the integrity and accuracy of financial transactions involving measurement through enforcement and administration of associated acts and regulations. Or another way to say it is, they basically make sure us as consumers, when we go to the gasoline to buy gas, or when we go to the grocery store to buy cold cuts, we don't get ripped off. So you can see here in the bottom right corner, there is actually an inspector who is currently examining a weighing scale to see how accurate it is. And if you look on the left side, there's actually a sticker here. That's the inspection sticker. So the next time when you go and get gas, or if you go to the grocery store and you're buying stuff, look for that sticker. because that sticker basically shows that, you know, it's been certified by a Measurement Canada inspector. So it's good to go. Next slide, please. So something I wanted to kind of share with you guys, our team, we love memes. So you'll see a lot of memes throughout our slides. So the first thing we want to do is we want to kind of walk you guys through a little bit about our problem discovery journey. Next slide, please. So when we first landed in Ottawa, we tried to understand the different types of problems that were happening at Measurement Canada. And how we did that was we identified what were the largest groups in Measurement Canada. And they were the inspectors, metrologists, specialists, and district inspectors. So from there, then we decided to pick out about 3 to 5 people from each role to get a quick high-level understanding of the different types of problems that each role is experiencing. From there, then I started identifying and grouping their pain points through an exercise called affinity mapping. And then we used something called an environmental scan to then identify the different potential risks and blockers that we may encounter. Next slide, please. You want to actually show the Miro link?
Sorry about that.
Click.
Oop, oop, oop.
Plug it.
There we go. Can you still see the screen okay?
Yep, it's just loading. Quick second. Yeah, because our Miro board's actually pretty massive, so it takes a little bit of time. Hopefully it zooms in properly.
Let's see.
So I think it's the top left corner in the map. So have you seen the map in the bottom right?
Map in the bottom right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, click on that big cluster in the middle.
This one? This one?
The other one, yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, sorry. I think it's the one, how should I do this? It's the one in the middle. If you just, so you see that giant cluster in the bottom? Yeah, so, yep, right here. And you just go up a bit. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so we started kind of mapping out the different kinds of pain points that they experience. And we used what's called an affinity mapping exercise to kind of group them together. So this is an example of like some of the different pain points that they experience. So we can see here for DMs, these are district managers. We see that a lot of times, you know, some of their pain points are being able to kind of meet their targets. Some pain points are proper documentation, good communication, flexibility in their plans. And we'll kind of go into the problem a little bit more. But we just kind of want to show you at a high level kind of what we did to try to identify the clusters of pain points. Yep, so back to deck, yep. So next slide, please. So now that we've kind of understood, like there are all these different, oops, sorry, go back one. So now that we kind of understand all the different types of problems that Measurement Canada has, you know, how do we decide on what to tackle? Because the reality is we only have a very limited amount of time. So we utilize a 3-star system to rank key attributes, and we use the measurement, you know, the more stars, the better. So we create 2 attributes in there, and we call them C4C product value and business feasibility. So the C4C product value is basically our perspective, so us as in the fellows, the amount of value we think a digital solution can bring to the problem, given our own capacity and the time frame and the scalability of the solution. And the second one, business feasibility, was something that we actually had the partners, our business partners, help us identify, or they basically kind of talk about, based on the problems, they'll kind of say, you know, they think this is like a regulation problem, or if it's a cultural problem, things like that. So we use that kind of as like another gauge. So you can click on the link to the Airtable. So after this exercise, we kind of grouped it all together, and this is kind of what we see. So if you kind of scroll up and down this, you'll see there's a total of 8 different problems, and we kind of highlighted these 8 problems because these are what we call recurring problems. Recurring problems are defined as problems that individuals are having, more than one individual is experiencing. So you can see here, you know, the C4C product value at the top, the business feasibility, policy enablers, technology enablers, things like that. Go back, please. And next slide. So after doing this ranking, we basically settled on the problem space surrounding the logistical planning and coordination of inspectors. So we identified that there were two types of problems. Oops, sorry. Is this better? So we identified there are two areas in this problem space. The first one pertaining to the human resource allocation and the equipment allocation, because inspectors have to also book equipments to do their inspections. So our first problem statement focuses on the former. So this is our problem statement. Inspectors find it frustrating when attempting to do the logistical planning and coordination of inspections. It is a time-consuming and repetitive experience with very minimal infrastructure in place to help streamline the process. And a quote that we actually heard from one of the inspectors out in Alberta, he said, "If this problem isn't solved, it would mean to me that innovation is dead at Measurement Canada." So we just kind of want to hide that to kind of show the level of severity of this problem that inspectors are having. Next slide, please. And this is the second problem statement that kind of captures that equipment aspect. So inspectors find it difficult to effectively coordinate with inspectors in neighboring areas to prevent duplication of work, equipment sharing, and to ensure proper coverage of inspection areas. An inspector can typically cover a lot of different places. So, for example, an inspector in Alberta can be responsible for covering somewhere in Nunavut as well. So there's a lot of coordination involved. Next slide, please. So before we kind of before I give the mic to my colleague Ramis, we decided that, like, as a first step, we're going to start with the first problem statement, as that's kind of like the first starting point of any kind of inspection planning. And Ram is going to go through with us in detail.
Thanks, Jasper. Yeah, so once we had decided on the problem and identified what we wanted to pursue, we sent out a baseline gathering study, and the goal was to fill in our knowledge gaps. With what we had done so far, we'd done scoping interviews to get a sense of what the big problems are. And now that we identified what we wanted to pursue further, we wanted to fill in our gaps where we had them and get a broader understanding of the problem space from a quantitative and qualitative standpoint. Next slide, please. And so, oh, actually, I see. So once we had our study come back, we got a lot of information. One of the first things we started putting together was our personas. So we took a lot of our qualitative and quantitative knowledge, and we put together our personas, and this helps us consolidate a lot of our data and helped us understand our users more clearly. And so here you guys see a inspector persona. There are primary type of personas, and we have two different types of inspectors. Here you guys see one of them. And so this gives us a good understanding of what the goals and frustrations that our personas are facing. If you go to the next slide, please. And so this is our second type of persona, which is a manager persona. The managers are our secondary user type, but they are very crucial to how inspectors are assigned, and they play a big part in the inspectors planning out their inspection process. So both of these combined are two different types of personas. Next slide, please. And so outside of the personas, we also got a very good understanding of what the current process the inspectors go through. Essentially, what you kind of see here is us kind of illustrating them getting assigned inspections from all these different types of, email, phone, all these different avenues that they get assigned, and it's their job to then figure out, and they have to figure out, what is priority, where do they have to go, what do they need, what equipment do they need, all the documentation, and essentially they're spending a lot of time doing this administrative work that isn't even inclusive of their actual job, which is to inspect the actual device. And they're spending a lot of their time doing this stuff and not on actually getting the inspections done, which is what their actual job is. Moving forward to the next slide, please. And so the other thing that they have to kind of manage is the tools that they have to use. Right now, they're kind of having to switch between their databases. They're having to switch between mapping software to figure out where they're actually going to go. They have to figure out, they have to go and coordinate with a lot of people through phones. So there's a lot of these tools that they have to kind of go through, and there's no streamlined way of for them to like prep and get all the documentation in a one solid place. And so I'll be now going into where we are now. So next slide. So right now we are in, we have finished our discovery phase, and we're at the tail end of our definition phase, and we're starting our ideation phase. And here you can see our first round of ideation. With all the knowledge that we've gathered so far, we're starting to sort of sketch out what a potential interface could look like to help streamline this this problem and make it easier for the inspectors to do their job. Next slide. And so from a product timeline perspective, we're halfway through our fellowship. We've started working on our tech diligence, and our developer colleague has started working on figuring out how we can start building the tools. And then we will be engaging our user panel group soon with some wireframes to start user testing and seeing, validating our design decisions. Next slide. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you both. Much appreciated. So just a reminder to pop your questions into the Q&A section, please, and enjoy one another's company in the chat section, but please pop your questions into the Q&A section, and after we hear from Seyi, we'll go through those. And if we don't get to your questions, don't worry, we have your contact information, so we'll definitely reach out to you with anything that we can't answer during our time together. With that, I will pass it over to you, Seyi.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Seyi Taylor. I'm the product manager with the OMAFRA team. My colleagues are Rola and Zola. Yeah, I'm not going to make that joke today. So, next slide, please. So we're posted to OMAFRA, which is the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, which is a pretty important ministry. The GDP of like the agriculture in Ontario is, estimated to be worth around 7 billion. And we're in Guelph. Well, now I'm in Guelph due to COVID, but we're supposed to be in Guelph. Next slide. Which doesn't look like that picture. It looks like this picture. This is a picture I took from Guelph yesterday. All right, well, thanks. No worries, it's fine. This is what Guelph actually looks like. Great. So we work with the plant health team. The plant health team is essentially a group of crop and pest specialists, and they conduct research, surveillance, and analysis on factors that affect crop health, plant and crop health. I'm going to just try and explain what that actually means. And there's like short-term research and explaining that you understand the problem a lot more. So they conduct short-term research in terms of what happens within a planting season, and then long-term research over a long period of time for things like the effectiveness of pesticides and herbicides and how much is enough, what combinations work, etc. They analyze weather patterns, pest crop patterns, to surveil entire planting areas for pests and warn farmers. So next slide. And they get a bunch of data, and they basically do a lot of analysis on that, and they have to send that data over to growers and industry. Growers are either individual farmers, or they're part of like large corporate groups, or they're part of like growers associations. Now, these growers depend on these insights to be able to make smart decisions around protecting their crops. And that's anything from using more pesticide or using specific techniques to not using pesticides. One of the things that one particular specialist group works on is figuring out the right amount of pesticide to use and not anymore, so that we don't have a lot of pesticide in our food. And those insights, next slide, have to get to growers really quickly, otherwise they can be too late. In 2017, one pest caused $80 million worth of losses in Ontario, just one pest alone. And so you can get a sense of like how important it is to not just get the information correctly, but actually get that information over to growers very quickly. Next slide. So what's the problem? Well, Code for Canada called us like the godfather, and then we went in there to kind of solve what that problem was. No, actually not really. But what's the problem? Next slide. The actual problem is that they get data from a bunch of sources. Each specialist is responsible for a crop or a pest or a group of crops or a group of pests. And they're responsible for specific types of research. They get data from a bunch of sources. Some of the data they get from their own research, some of it they get from research partners like the University of Guelph. Some of the data they get from grower associations, including like from all around the country and sometimes from the United States. So say, for example, if you're tracking pest movements from the States, you want to know when it gets to Canada, you want to know what you're supposed to do. That data comes in all sorts of formats. Sometimes it comes in paper, it comes in Excel sheets, and the Excel sheets are not always formatted properly. It's really hard to like arrange data. It's a complete mess. You can have data that's supposed to be, insights that are supposed to be ready in a week or two, not be ready for 2 or 3 months. And so because data is so messy, because there's no simple place to keep the data, it causes a bunch of sludge. It's so difficult to get this out. And so we were called to help them manage their data better. We see we could come up with a digital solution that to help them speed up their processes so they could get those insights to growers a lot faster. Next slide. So one of the first things that we did was to organize a sprint with specialists. Like we said, there are a lot of specialists at OMAFRA. They don't work in silos, but they all have specific responsibilities, and we wanted to get them aligned on expectations. We wanted to get aligned on understanding what the problem was. We wanted to reveal attitudes, where they thought where they thought we would fail, what success looked like for them. And so we organized this sprint event, which was very well attended, and we got one quote that said, "I normally hate things with sticky notes, but this was not a complete waste of my time." So that's what one of the specialists said. Next slide, please. From Sprint Zero, we were able to bring up, get a lot of insights. This is one of the documents that we were able to bring out from this. This was essentially a success spectrum, and we built a sort of product, success roadmap in terms of what would be useful and where the line between failure and success would be, as well as what target success would be like and what would be epic. And in doing this and distributing it back to the specialists, we were able to get all of them aligned as a group, which is super important because they're not only the primary stakeholders, they're also the users, are going to be primary users of this product. Next slide. And then we did a bunch of research, which is a lot like Law and Order, except we don't have the soundtrack to it. But research is essentially asking a ton of questions. And for us, we went really deep into it. We built a sort of rubric to work with, and that rubric allowed us to fill in the blanks and understand how every specialist went from raw data to insights that went to growers. And we went around to a group of specialists, next slide, about 11 individual specialists, apart from small specialist groups. We also talked to growers who were the recipients of the data, of the insights, about how they used it, wanted to understand how they used it, what they felt the value was, where there were issues. And some of the growers also acted as sources of data. So we also wanted to understand how they participated in that. There are a bunch of partner organizations within OMAFRA that are not necessarily the specialists that work with OMAFRA. And we wanted to talk to them. So either they do IT support or they provide logistics support. And we also wanted to understand how they participated in this process. Next slide. This is a summary data roadmap that applies to essentially the entire specialist group. We built out individual roadmaps for each specialist, but this is like a summary data roadmap. We broke down sources of data. So essentially it's like on the extreme left, you have essentially where does the data come from, either for partners in the form of Excel sheets or emails, or a format called ARM, which is very, very peculiar to this industry, or novel data where it's like fresh data that's created by the specialist, either in paper forms, believe it or not, or an application called Survey 123, or sometimes external data. So they try to get data from Environment Canada, weather data, which is part of like some of the data that they need. And what we found was a plethora of issues in getting that data into storage, from everything from having to deduplicate, remove duplicates, check for errors, reformat, etc. That we found out that they used Excel for storage of data, and that each specialist had their own storage essentially on their computer, so that if that laptop ever got lost or the specialist retired, and this had happened before, all the data that was on that computer would like essentially disappear. Yeah. And then, and the other thing obviously is that people will sometimes delete data by mistake and will not be able to get it back. And then they use the same tools for analysis, insights, visualization. So where you see like the red hourglasses, those are places where we found issues and things that slow things down. Where you see green lightning bolts, opportunities for speeding things up. Next slide. We also built user personas. From there, this is an example. There's a whole bunch of them. There is no time to go through all of them. The crop guru probably forms the bulk of the specialists. They're extremely, extremely knowledgeable about their area of expertise. They really understand, both farming and the crops and the pests, and they're really smart about it. The problem is, or the challenges are, it's really hard to get the information that they know across to growers really quickly because of difficulty in collecting data, because they have to spend so much time cleaning the data before they can do any analysis whatsoever. Sometimes it's difficult to even share the threats because there's like a whole lot of bureaucracy around sending information out. Next slide, sorry. So that's just a summary of the research. There's definitely a lot more that went into it than that, but we developed a problem statement which, essentially says that because of challenges in collecting and analyzing data, it's difficult for specialists to generate important insights and share them with growers. And as a result, growers don't always have access to the tools to respond to threats in real time. And that's a real problem. And it affects everything that we regular quote unquote people do, including our food supply, and the quality of it and just the security of it. Next slide. Thank you. So we decided to focus on a problem area, again, like just using that roadmap, as we kind of broke the roadmap into like three big areas: collection, analysis, and storage, and publishing, both within the scope of what our project was supposed to be, and where we felt there was the need for where we will create the most impact, but also like where there was greatest need. We decided to focus on collection, analysis, and storage. One of the things I think I'll just take a detour and speak on is that what we're doing is we're taking essentially a two-track approach with this. One of the things we're doing is providing, because we know that we're at OMAFRA for a limited time, we're trying to provide for them a roadmap that they can continue developing on even after we're gone. Because this problem is so central to the work that they do that it doesn't work to just fix one thing, kind of leave it alone. But it makes more sense to say, here's how we would fix this, and then here's the piece that we're going to fix before we leave. But if we provide you like a roadmap, and that's one of the things that we're really working really hard on with them right now, is how do we sustain this beyond when we're gone, so that continuous development continues after we're gone. Next slide. And so our solution focusing on this area essentially needs to be flexible. Now, what does flexibility mean? What it means is that no two specialists collect the same data sets. They don't make the same data sets. There are no two specialists that make the same data sets. One specialist, for example, does pest tracking. And that pest tracking, essentially what they're tracking is pests, number of pests in a trap, which is essentially how they used to measure the pest, the location of the farm, whose farm it was. That's the kind of data that they collect. That data is very different from another one that does herbicide effectiveness studies. Okay, That being said, what we did realize is that there are a bunch of fundamental key fundamental blocks, building blocks to each data set. So one day, it's essentially most data sets contain pests and crops and herbicides and numbers and times and ratios and so on and so forth. And so what we're designing is a solution that allows each specialist to work with a set of building blocks to create a data structure that is interoperable with another person's, but separate to them, but uses the same data block, so that essentially like all the data can be stored in the same database. We're also building the solution in a modular fashion so that wherever we stop, we can continue to be expanded on, because essentially you can build on top of it, because we're essentially building modules as opposed to trying to build one entire huge solution. And then we're also putting a bunch of APIs so that's interoperable with other software. So say, for example, the first thing that we're building based on our prioritization matrix is the storage application. And say, for example, in a year from now, OMAFRA decides to buy some data analysis software. Essentially, instead of throwing away this application, they should be able to connect that data analysis software to the API to get the data from the storage piece and continue using it without actually having to throw it away. And then finally, we're using a modern stack that should make it easy for them to continue to hire developers if they wanted to, and not have to essentially be able to like pick from a wide pool of developers that are available right now. Next slide. COVID has kind of like, done a bunch of things. Has it done a number on us? So we've gone from meetings that are, very collegial. We had a very nice conference room and offices. We've gone from that to like meeting in Zoom. And we do now remote work there. Next slide. Socializing, also remote socializing with our partners. We kind of have had a pretty decent relationship with them. By Zoom, it's challenging in many ways, I think. There's stuff that feels lost, but we've, tried to work really hard to stay on top of things. And we definitely feel that we'll continue to make like a ton of progress through that. Final slide. I think there's like a few things that we learned. With this, a great partner team is priceless, and we've been very fortunate to work with a really great partner team. I think we say this like literally all the time to everyone who can hear it. Our partner team is fantastic, which is partially why we socialize with our partner team. It's really easier to build a solution when you learn to care for the users. This is another thing that we learned. The amount of time we spent in research, especially with an area that is very unfamiliar to us, had helped us understand not just the problem as a technical problem, but also understand the effect it has on people. And we've met like a bunch of people, from people who just started working on OMAFRA to people who are retiring from OMAFRA. And so that range of people like just telling us about their careers and so on and so forth has just been like very helpful to us in building empathy for our users and building out a solution that we think would be useful for them. Time pressure can be a really good thing. Everyone complains, quote unquote, like we only have 10 months to work with, but I think it's very useful also in like focusing you and getting you to. It's also very useful in terms of like leveraging negotiations. Your partners will say, well, listen, we're only going to be here for X months. We don't have that much time left. So you kind of like have to sign off on this or not. Rituals matter. So that's the other thing. As we moved offline, some of the habits and the rituals that we built offline really became like super useful at that time. So whether it became like our weekly sprints or just the habit of like discussing, having comfortable and uncomfortable conversations, or even making it a habit to from time to time speak to our partners formally and informally, all those rituals became very useful. Finally, document everything, and it's not to cover your behind. It's really more about you than for everyone else. I think documenting gives you a lot of reference points to work from. And one of the things that we found is that it's very easy for us to go back, read stuff that we've written before, and just kind of like build on that. The other thing, again, that COVID has done, is specific to COVID, I think, is that you have to write more. And that writing is like super useful. Thank you very much. I'm done.
I promise that wasn't me playing the music to get you off stage. Sorry.
Yeah, but that's literally it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. Virtual applause. So I see some questions have trickled in, which is awesome. Let's dive into those. Bear with me a moment while I call them up on the screen here. Let me see. I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a sec. Okay. Oh, sweet. We've got a bunch. Yay. Where to begin? Okay, so we have a question from Marie Fidel Rosario. Hopefully I got that right. And the question is to the fellows, to everyone, thank you for sharing examples. Firstly, question, were you working full-time and you applied for the fellowship program? If so, did you negotiate a 10-month leave or sabbatical with your employers? Anyone can jump in, yeah, feel free.
I can talk about this. I had an interesting, so I was working full-time and I had only been at my company for like 5 months. And it was like the week I got full-time there is the week that I got this fellowship, and I had to like talk with my director and say I'm leaving. So I wasn't able to get any sort of like sabbatical or anything like that. So I just had to kind of quit cold turkey, I guess. But yeah, so that, for me, I don't have anything lined up or anything like that.
Yeah, I was actually working at a digital consulting agency prior to this. I guess looking back, I would have wanted to kind of ask them for like a sabbatical leave, but I didn't. So here I am today. But like I applied and went through the entire process while working.
Yeah, same. I applied while working, and I didn't ask for leave, which now I think about it.
We made a mistake.
No. But no, seriously, no, I didn't ask for leave. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, we have another question from Divya Pal, who says, hello. Divya is a product strategist working at a digital project agency in Toronto, and Divya is wondering what happens to the projects after the fellowship ends. Is there potential to continue to work on these after the fellowship? Maybe Doug can jump in a little bit there.
Yeah, for sure. So that's touching on something that we're talking about right now a little bit. At the 5-month mark now for this fellowship cohort in particular, there is a transition period that does exist, and we do everything that we can to help our government partners in sort of transition who will be the next individuals that will be taking over some of those responsibilities once the fellows do leave. It does really depend on the team, though. I will say, like, some teams take it on to an external individual. Some teams actually build the capacity within their own departments themselves. I'll speak to OMAFRA, so Shay's department that he was with. In the provincial context, they have what's called the Land Resource Cluster. So there's been some conversations around what that would look like if the Land Resource Cluster were to take over some things. It really depends, though, on the context in particular for that.
Thank you. One more question here. What does this say? Oh, what initially drew you to apply to the fellowship?
For me, I was just looking to do more. I primarily work in a lot of agencies, and I worked in startups and enterprise organizations. And the work that I've always enjoyed more is something that kind of helps someone, has like some sort of positive impact. And this fellowship seemed like the perfect way to do that. So for me, that was sort of the morality of it all. Just was a big draw.
Yeah, more or less same thing for me. So I come from like a public safety space industry, and after I left the startup, I was kind of looking for something that allowed me to kind of do something where I felt like I was doing something good again. And when I kind of heard about COVID Canada and I looked at the previous cohorts, kind of what they did, I was definitely inspired to want to be a part of this program to help do something good.
yeah, I was just interested. I thought it was just a very interesting challenge. I've done mostly startup work. I think, though, what I'd like to say also is working on the problem has made it even more apparent to me just how important the work is. Just getting to understand, how important it is. It literally just felt. I remember when we got the brief, I thought, "Oh, this is interesting," but I just get into but not that big a deal. You get, you get to the weeds of it, and you realize, oh, this is super important, and their actual livelihoods and actual, lives as well. Lives is maybe much, but you understand what I'm saying? Yes.
Cool. Next question is from Lee St. James, who wonders, does C4C have a standard set of tools they recommend fellows use? And Lee's wondering how to determine best practices and would love some recommendations around tools. I don't know that we recommend tools in particular, but maybe you could share a bit about what tools you're using right now, like what you found useful.
So we're using, I think Jasper's team, we're also using Miro for some of the work that we're doing, and Trello, and then the Google Suites. It's pretty basic, but there's no, there's no top-down recommendation or mandate to use specific tools. Whatever you think works for you as a team is what you end up using. Yeah, our designer uses Sketch. I make a bunch of illustrations sometimes with Figma. Everybody kind of gets, what it is that works for you works for you. I think the results matter. In terms of techniques and frameworks and so on, again, we have a lot of opportunity to experiment. We have a 1 month onboarding where we're exposed to a bunch of techniques and frameworks to work with in thinking through problems. But those, we're not mandated to use those, but they're very useful. So I'll be very honest, they're super useful. And we probably all, I know that we did leverage that information in our work. But some of the frameworks that we use were others that we saw elsewhere, or from experience, or that we modified for the project.
I think for our team, I think the way we think about it is a few factors, kind of what are some tools that we are proficient in? How cost efficient is it? Can it actually do what we need it to do? And I think this question, you specifically stated for startups. The way I would say is there is no best tool. It kind of comes down to those 3 factors that I listed. But I would imagine for a startup, price is also going to be something really important. So definitely make sure to look for things that are free. So Airtable, Miro, there are free services. We use Jira because our partners have Jira, but there are also other tools out there, like say Pivotal Tracker, that could work as well. So look around for that in that regards.
I would say relevant to the previous question that was asked around the transition of the project after it ends, what we always say is that we recommend that the fellows use something that the government partners themselves will be able to take on after after the fellows have actually left. To Jasper's point that he highlighted, it really depends on what the partners themselves are using, as well as it really doesn't make any sense using an entirely new tool that the partners won't be able to take on afterwards, especially considering that there are different things that have to be taken into consideration in government departments, depending on what tools their specific either firewalls or security protocols allow for them to be used. But it really, the best practice, we would always say, is just to have that conversation with those government partners in particular to see what works best in terms of what is a new tool that can be used that they could develop as well, and kind of find that balance between what is new and can be used as a new insight, as well as something that they can actually be used after the fellows and their 10-month residency.
Thanks, Doug. Let me scroll through some more here. Ooh, there are more popping in. Actually, while that happens, I have a question. I've been curious about how your experience has been. We touched on it a little bit, but like we're working remotely is unexpected, and I wonder what your strategies are for working together as a team, and also for like keeping communication and working in the open regularly with your government partners. Like, what are you doing differently to make sure that that's still happening?
Maybe we can start first from this side. So from a communication standpoint, kind of as she said, rituals are really important. So one of our partners joins us for our daily stand-ups. But on top of that, we've also recently started introducing what we call like a drop-in get-together hangout time. So every Friday is just an opportunity to kind of talk about other things. It doesn't have to be about the project. It's just kind of stay connected in that way. In terms of like kind of working in the open, we spend a lot of time making sure we document things on Confluence, writing our blogs, writing articles, and we pay special attention to find opportunities to raise awareness of these things. So I know, for example, I'm currently working with one of the director of marketing to figure out how we can create a permanent space in their internal newsletters. So all the employees can see on a regular basis kind of what is happening and kind of be referred to the blogs and whatnot.
Yeah, we also have like a blog we are populating with like the different milestones of just different articles about things. And then we're also doing lunch and learns once a month or so to talk about certain topics. And just so far we've done Agile, like what Agile is. We've done, we just did one on working remotely yesterday. So that's another way we're kind of engaging everybody and keeping everyone up to speed.
We are also, so there's a bunch of things. Internally, we have weekly meetings, which are actually expanding to twice. We're expanding to bi-weekly. And we have, but we also have like groups, apart from our Slack group, we have like our WhatsApp group internally, and there's a ton of like impromptu, okay, let's sit down, like huddle and talk about this if we think there's something that needs to be talked about. This is internally. We also have a similar arrangement with some of our partners. We have, our team doesn't have, OMAFRA doesn't have a technical team that we're working with internally. So we're essentially working with specialists, and specialists have a liaison type person that can like work with us on a day-to-day basis. So that person is in a WhatsApp group with us also. We write on our blog internally. We document and write a bunch of emails for everything. We have social events via Zoom, which kind of sucks, but it's okay. And yeah, the idea is to, where possible, where necessary, get on the phone and have just a conversation about things. Where not, write an email about that. Also, make sure that we're all on the same page. And so far, it's been pretty useful. Even when we're writing official documents, sometimes we kind of like do it back and forth. And so that the final document is essentially a product of a conversation, an ongoing conversation. And that conversation in itself creates just more opportunities to discuss issues that might not be clear. Finally, we're about to start development now, software development now. Sorry, I just forgot to say this. And so every other week, we will be meeting with our core team and just demoing whatever we've built. No matter how small or insignificant, they will get to see it, and they will have, and we've created a feedback framework for them to essentially every other week tell us what they think works or doesn't work and give us feedback on that.
Awesome. We do something similar. We have Hangouts for Canada every Friday at 5 o'clock, and we all jump into Zoom and celebrate the week together. It's a good strategy. Okay, next question. I think our Director of Outreach, Luke, is going to jump in and answer. Are you there?
Yep.
Oh, hello. Okay, question is, can you share any success stories of C4C developed MVPs that are being adopted by the government partner?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Kush. Jasper and Seyi and Ramis represent the fourth cohort of Code for Canada Fellows. So I'll share just a little, I'll share a few success stories from each of the previous three cohorts. Just, off the top of my head, one of the first cohorts of fellows worked with the Canadian Digital Service and Veteran Affairs Canada on a tool that enabled veterans to more easily kind of find and register for the benefits that they're eligible for. That service launched in an alpha some time ago and continues to be available and to go into development. So there's a product with Veterans Affairs Canada that fellows helped create. In the second cohort, let's see, there's more than one, but the City of Toronto hosted a fellowship in 2018, and the goal was to sort of better make available and use data around kind of road safety, so traffic volumes, collision data, things like that. That tool that fellows built is actually being used by the city now internally. It's called Move, and the project continues. I think actually one of our fellows gave a presentation at a React conference today about that same project. And then trying to think about what's going on. Our most recent cohort, the team helped the Public Health Agency of Canada, turns out to be a very timely fellowship partner, build a tool that's going to help them to better kind of track and manage their grant program, and that should be going live internally at FAC sometime in this year. Absolutely every fellowship cohort, nearly every fellowship project continues in some form with their partners, and you can learn more about all of those projects on our blog, on our YouTube channel, and at future Code for Canada events.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. That feels like a good place to stop. We're a few minutes past time. So as I mentioned, I will absolutely follow up with anyone whose question wasn't answered just now via email. And I appreciate you joining us and asking questions and being curious. As Luke mentioned, you can find us all over social media. Our website is code4.ca. And these things are so awkward to end. I think that's all we have to say. So we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Everyone, thanks for coming. Take care.